Cars are built for a reason. Some are built to impress, others are built to intimidate. But maybe the rarest are the ones built simply because someone believed it was the right thing to do. The T50 belongs firmly in the latter group. It certainly doesn't feel like a car developed as a response to market trends. Instead, it feels like a car Gordon Murray has been developing in his mind for decades. So to understand the T50, you have to understand Gordon Murray. And to understand Gordon Murray, you have to go back to a place far removed from carbon fiber tarps and 12,000 RPM engines, to South Africa in the 50s, where a young Murray grew up obsessed with cars and engineering. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this video on the GMA T.50. This video is brought to you by Selected Car Investment, where we buy and sell only the best collectible cars. Check our website to see if your next car happens to be in stock, or contact us for off-market cars, or if you want help to find your next investment. Gordon Murray built his first car with his father in their garage. He raced, he designed, he improvised. He wasn't actually interested in doing things the way they'd always been done. He wanted to do them better. That mindset took him to the UK, a melting pot of motorsports, where he joined the Brabham racing team in 1969. It wasn't long before a new team principal called Bernie Ecclestone, you might have heard of him, spotted Murray's talent. Not just as a designer of details, but as a thinker of the grand scheme. Someone who could read, see the same regulations everyone else saw, but understood them differently. By the late 1970s, Murray was promoted to technical director of Brabham. And under his guidance, Brabham produced some of the most innovative and controversial machines in Formula One history, including, of course, the infamous BT46B Fan Car. When Brabham faded away years later, Murray moved on to McLaren. And there, under a certain Ron Dennis, you might also have heard of him, he became something even more capable, well-funded. It was in his time as technical director of McLaren that Murray's design team created the McLaren MP4/4, arguably the most dominant Formula One car of all time. Where to go after that? Well, Murray took to something arguably even more ambitious, to build the world's ultimate road-going sports car. That car, the McLaren F1, became the stuff of legends. Not because it was the fastest, although for a long period of time it actually was, but because it felt like it was being built without permission. No compromises, no budget caps, just pure engineering ideals turned into carbon and aluminium and V12 power and noise. Did Murray succeed? Well, as some of you know, we just showed one of our other F1s at the Concorso della Ganza Villa d'Este recently, and we'll do a full video on the F1 later. There is an F1 in there somewhere. After the F1, Murray stepped away from what you could call traditional supercar development. He was always obsessed with efficiency and began focusing on lightweight city vehicles, on modular manufacturing, and what he called right-weighting, the art of giving every gram a reason to exist. And quietly, across the time of consulting and developing, Gordon Murray refined an idea. A cleaner one, a simpler one, and one that became the T50. This car is not only a spiritual sequel to the F1. It is in fact a parallel answer to the same question. What happens when you design a car entirely around the driver? To build the new car, Murray started from effectively zero. New company, new facilities, new supply chains, and above all, new constraints. Because this time he wouldn't have the budget of a Formula One team. On the other hand, he would have no one to answer to besides himself. And the result is this, the GMA T.50. Let's start with the headline figures. All of this weighs just 986 kilograms, which is less than a Volkswagen Up. A 3.9 litre naturally aspirated V12, developed with Cosworth, and it makes more than 650 horsepower, which incidentally is just a bit more than the original F1. And that engine has a red line at 12,100 RPM. And not least this, a 6-speed manual gearbox. And the last part might matter even more than the numbers, because the T.50 is not just about its lightness or its power, it's about its focus, in a way that not necessarily shows up in a spec sheet. To quote Gordon Murray himself, it's not about lap times, it's about feel. Of course, one feature of the T.50 in particular demands special attention, the fan at the back. A 400mm carbon fiber disc recessed into the car like an engineering riddle. Now, it's true, Murray has done something similar before. The Brabham BT46B Formula One car of 1976 did use a fan to extract air through the radiators. But ingeniously, its suction powers also generated a low pressure area under the car, creating downforce. But that was a loophole, a brilliant, glorious and short-lived trick from a designer's lateral thinking. The Brabham famously won only one race before it was retired. The fan in the T.50 actually works in a slightly different way. It does also suck air from the underbody, but it uses that air to control or redirect a larger airflow to a tuned diffuser and in that way generate downforce. And it can also increase cooling under high load or lower drag at higher speeds. So this feature in effect helps the T.50 stay smooth, sculpted and light, avoiding aggressive wings, ground scraping splitters. It does not look aggressive, but it grips as aggressively as the others. But step inside and the focus sharpens even further. The T.50 is a 3-seater layout. The driver is in the central position, just like in the F1 in fact. But the layout wasn't revived for nostalgia reasons. It exists because it makes sense. Weight is balanced, sightlines are perfect, the whole experience is symmetrical. But if this concept is so brilliant, why does very few other cars feature it, you might ask? Which is a very good question. One obvious disadvantage you will feel every time you enter and exit the car. And don't even try exiting the car with a passenger in the seat. But maybe even worse from a manufacturer's point of view is the fact that it's not easy implementing standard systems in this layout. Safety systems, chassis, routing of everything, basically everything becomes more difficult. And that's why fewer cars use it. It's not that it's not better, it is that it's not easier. And in case you thought this whole exercise is about nostalgia towards the McLaren F1, it's not. Murray's favorite road car isn't even a supercar. It is actually the Lotus Elan of the 60s. Light, simple, communicative. A car that didn't rely on horsepower to deliver thrills. Incredibly, the T.50 is actually cut from the same cloth, although now with power, lots of power. Which leads us to this engine, V12 and all. The most surprising thing maybe is, of course it's hugely powerful, immensely powerful actually. The biggest surprise is when you know it revs to 12, how tractable it is at anything below. So it's not like you need to bounce off the 12,000 all the time, not at all. And it's just so enjoyable, entirely to the rev range. In fact, the engine development story is not unlike that of the F1, where Murray turned to BMW. But they're very busy with electrics now, we hear. This powerhouse weighs just 178 kilograms. It's quite compact for the power, and it revs with an urgency that borders on absurd. The throttle response clocks in at 28 milliseconds from idle to 12,100 RPM. That's faster than most people can process what's just happened. And because the air intake sits right above the driver's head, what you hear is not a filtered simulation. It's real induction noise, mechanical symphony, music to the disciples of internal combustion engines. But even that is just one ingredient in a very strong cocktail. And to quote Gordon Murray once again, the car had to be light, not because it is fashionable, but because it is right. And that lightness touches every aspect of the car, even here when we're driving slowly on, well, not too good Danish roads. As the car is subtle, it's not stiff, it doesn't try to rattle your brains out. The steering feels unassisted, not filtered. The brakes are carbon ceramic, yes, but tuned for road modulation, not track day extremes. Everything exists here because it earns its keep. Nothing here exists for show, making the T.50 the paradoxical supercar that is not showy. So where does the T.50 sit in today's landscape of sports cars and supercars? What does it compare to? Well, to nothing really. The Porsche 911 GT3 Touring might come close in spirit and relative discreet appearance. It's rear-wheel driven, it's manual, and it's focused on driver engagement. But it's much heavier. And although a brilliant sports car, it's still a mass-produced one and a less exotic car, much less rare, and of course, 6 cylinders only. The Ferrari 812 Competizione has a wonderful V12. Angry, operatic, naturally aspirated. But it's a front-engine GT. More missile than scalpel, you could say. And far removed from the intimacy of the T.50. So a different proposition altogether. From Lamborghini and their history of great V12s, there's the Revuelto, technological insanity. A hybrid powertrain, 3 electric motors, and carbon bits and pieces designed by a committee of aliens. Impressive, yes. Comparable? Not really. Probably it's the Aston Martin Valkyrie that comes closest in terms of ambition. And it too has a Cosworth V12. It looks like something that's escaped a prototype paddock, but still, also the Valkyrie is a very different story. The Valkyrie overwhelms. It was designed for track domination, and although road legal, it is barely at home on the public roads, especially in a Danish winter. It is instead a statement of extremes. The T50, it's a conversation. It's not trying to beat anyone. It is trying to talk to you, and it is brilliant. So let's talk about the one aspect that elevated the F1 from greatness to absolute legend. Motor racing. The T50 wasn't designed for it, but neither was the F1, remember? We all know how that turned out. The F1 GTR, suitably modified but fundamentally unchanged in concept, won Le Mans in 1995 against purpose-built race cars. At the time, that wasn't just an upset, it was a message. And the big question now is, could the T50 repeat that? Today's world is different. Regulations are tougher, budgets are tighter, and stakes are higher. Also for GMA themselves, because what if they did not win? Actually, GMA have developed the wilder T50 S Niki Lauda, a track-only version. Lighter, louder, stripped of all compromise. But in many ways, it's the idea of a proper road car that is so fundamentally capable that is the real triumph. This is the last combustion engine car Gordon Murray will ever design. He's made that very clear himself. It's the final chapter in a philosophy that began decades ago with pencil sketches and improbable dreams. Still, the T50 is not a swan song. It is a rolling signature from a master. It is a declaration that cars can still be simple, light, and deeply satisfying. Not despite the modern world, but in defiance of it. So how about the really big question? Is the T50 better than the McLaren F1? Well, we are not going to answer that question here, because that car deserves its own story. So we'll be taking up the F1 in an upcoming video. But let's just say this. The T50 doesn't try to replace the F1. Instead, it proves that the same ideals, lightness, clarity, engagement, still matter. And that, in today's world, is maybe even more impressive than the first time around. So if you liked this video and would like to see more... Sorry about that, guys. So if you like this video, please hit the like button. And if you like the content on our channel, consider subscribing, and we'll see you for the next one.